The first time Princess Lyrana saw the human, she felt disgust. He stood in the grand hall of the Crystal Palace, tall, scarred, wearing dull metal armor that looked completely out of place among the shining silver robes of the Zalari court. His name was Elias, a soldier from Earth, sent as a protector under a new peace agreement between humans and Zalari. To everyone else, he was a symbol of alliance, but to Lyrana, he was a stain on her world of beauty and perfection. The princess was raised among beings of grace. Her people, the Zalari, had smooth, glowing skin, eyes that shimmered like glass, and movements that looked like dance. They considered emotions a weakness and contact with other species, especially humans, something close to shameful. When her mother, the queen, introduced the human, Lyrana's smile was thin and fake. "A human guard?" she said in disbelief. "Are we running out of warriors of our own?" The queen's voice was calm but firm. "He is here under Earth's treaty. He saved a diplomat's life. His instincts are unmatched. You will treat him with respect." Elias bowed deeply before the princess. His voice was deep, calm, and unshaken. "It's an honor, Your Highness." Lyrana didn't bow back. Instead, she turned away, her silver hair flowing behind her like a river of light. "You will follow orders. Nothing more." Elias nodded once. "Understood." From that moment, she decided she hated him. She hated the way he walked behind her silently, always watching. She hated the sound of his boots against the marble floor, heavy and rough in the halls built for quiet footsteps. Most of all, she hated that his presence made her feel something unfamiliar and uncomfortable. To her, he was everything her people despised: emotional, imperfect human. Days passed and he remained near. When she walked through the gardens of light, he followed. When she attended council meetings, he stood behind her like a statue. He never spoke unless spoken to, never looked at her directly. Yet she could feel his attention, steady, protective, like a wall built between her and the world. She hated that too. One afternoon, as she left the council chamber, she turned suddenly. "You don't need to follow me everywhere," she said coldly. Elias met her eyes for the first time. His were dark brown, too human, too honest. "I'm not here for comfort, Your Highness," he said quietly. "I'm here to make sure you live." "Live?" she repeated, her voice sharp with pride. "No one would dare harm a princess of Zealar." He said nothing, only looked past her, scanning the corridor. Then, after a long pause, he murmured, "You'd be surprised." The words unsettled her. For a moment, she wanted to ask what he meant, but her pride wouldn't allow it. She lifted her chin and walked away. That night, she couldn't sleep. His words echoed in her mind. "You'd be surprised." The next morning, she saw him again, standing at his post outside her chamber. His armor was scratched, one arm bandaged, though she hadn't seen him in any battle. When she asked, the palace medic told her quietly that the human had stopped an intruder the night before, a cloaked figure carrying a poisoned blade. Lyrana froze. "He was protecting me?" The medic nodded. "Without him, the poison would have reached your room." She said nothing for the rest of the day, but her gaze found him more often than before. He never mentioned the attack. He stood the same way as always, silent, watchful. When she finally tried to thank him, her words came out awkwardly. "I heard about last night." He looked at her and smiled faintly. "Just doing my job, Princess." That small, calm smile, something about it made her heart twist. It wasn't pride. It wasn't arrogance. It was peace, but she quickly hid her reaction. "Don't think this makes you special, human," she said. He nodded slightly. "Wouldn't dream of it." She turned away before he could see the confusion in her eyes. Why did he not seem angry? Why did he never raise his voice? Why did he protect her even when she treated him like nothing? That night, as she lay in her golden bed, she remembered the rough warmth of his hand when he had caught her from slipping earlier that week. It had felt strange, alive almost, safe. She hated that feeling. She hated him. But deep inside, somewhere quiet, she wondered if perhaps hate was only the first word her heart had learned for fear. The sun rose over the crystal towers of Zealar, casting rainbows across the city like fire and water. Princess Lyrana walked through the palace gardens, her silver robes flowing behind her. She had hoped quietly that Elias might stay back today, giving her some space. But as always, he was there. A silent shadow moving just a step behind, she scowled. "Must you follow me everywhere?" "I must," he said calmly. "It is my duty to keep you safe." Lorana ignored him, focusing on the glowing flowers shaped like tiny suns. She still couldn't understand him. How could a human, weak in appearance, be stronger than her soldiers or her own guards? Every instinct she had told her to dismiss him. Yet a small, quiet part of her feared what would happen if he wasn't there. That afternoon, a messenger arrived with news of trouble near the northern gates. Rebels from a rival house were attempting a small attack. It wasn't much, but in Zelar even small disturbances could become deadly. I should go, Lorana said. You will not, Elias said firmly. You stay here. I will handle it. She frowned, unaccustomed to a human speaking with such authority. I am not a child. She snapped. I know, he said, but you are still a princess. Your life is more important than my own. The words made her pause. She didn't know why, but her chest tightened. Humans often spoke of bravery and loyalty. The Zalari spoke only of strategy and duty. Perhaps that was why she felt uneasy. He brought something raw and real into her life, something she couldn't control. Later that day, the palace trembled. A fire broke out near the eastern wing. Flames roared, smoke twisting into the sky like black snakes. Lyrana screamed as she saw servants running, some trapped under falling debris. Without thinking, Elias pushed through the chaos. He carried injured guards to safety, extinguished smaller flames, and guided terrified staff toward exit points. He moved like a whirlwind, yet every motion was precise. Your Highness, he shouted, appearing at her side just as a balcony began to collapse. He grabbed her arm and pulled her back, almost dragging her through the smoke. Lorana gasped, her silver hair catching firelight. Elias, you could have— I could have? He said, voice steady, though his arm burned from the heat. I didn't. That is all that matters. Her chest pounded, not from running, but from the shock of seeing him so calm, so fearless, while everything around them burned. She wanted to say something. Thank him, scold him, understand him. But the words died in her throat. By the time the fire was controlled, Lorana's hands were covered in soot, her robes singed. Elias knelt beside her, examining her for injuries, though she was unharmed. His armor was scorched, but his expression remained calm, even gentle. You shouldn't have risked yourself, she whispered. He shrugged. Protecting you isn't a risk. It is what I am made for. Nothing else matters. Something inside her stirred, a strange mixture of anger and gratitude. She hated how he made her feel powerless and safe at the same time. She hated how her heart raced when he was near. Later, when the palace had quieted, she found him in the garden. The firelight had left the sky glowing with orange and pink streaks. He sat on the ground, examining a small wound on his hand, muttering quietly. What are you doing out here? She asked, stepping closer. He looked up, eyes catching the last rays of the sun. Checking for damage, he said simply. Making sure no one was hurt. I promised myself I would save everyone I could. Lyrana stayed silent, watching him. His words were simple, but something about the way he said them carried weight. Human weight. They carried honesty, sacrifice, bravery. You are. Strange, she said finally. I am human, he replied softly. And humans often do strange things. For the first time, Lyrana didn't pull away. She didn't want to. He wasn't asking for her touch, but she felt the warmth of his presence, strong and unyielding. Her chest ached with a feeling she didn't understand, something like fear and admiration rolled into one. She hated it. She hated that she was starting to care. Elias stood, brushing off his scorched armor. Rest now, he said. You have seen enough danger for one day. Lyrana watched him leave, the faint sunlight reflecting off his armor. She hated him, and yet she realized something she couldn't admit even to herself. She was starting to need him. Somewhere in the depths of her chest, a quiet truth began to grow. Perhaps humans were not weak at all. Perhaps in their hearts they carried a fire no crystal palace could ever hold, and she hated that fire because it was his, and it was saving her life. After the fire, the palace was quiet, almost eerily so. Princess Lyrana walked through the corridors alone, her silver robes brushing the polished floors. She felt a strange emptiness, as if the warmth of the garden and the chaos of flames had left a mark on her soul. She could still see Elias's calm face in her mind, the human who had risked everything without hesitation. She hated him for it. She hated him for making her feel fragile, for showing her how powerless she could be even as a princess. The next morning, she entered the council chamber for a meeting with her advisors. Elias followed, as always, standing silently behind her. The elders began discussing new security measures, but Lyrana's thoughts were elsewhere. She couldn't stop thinking about the human's actions, his courage, and the way he moved through danger like it was second nature. "Princess," said an elder, noticing her distraction. "Are you listening?" "Yes," she said sharply. "Continue." But her mind replayed every moment from the fire. The way Elias had thrown himself over a burning balcony. The way his hands had steadied terrified servants. The calm in his voice even when his armor smoked and burned. That evening, she found him again in the palace gardens. He was tending to a small fire pit, carefully arranging logs and stones. Normally, she would have walked away, but something inside her urged her to stay. "You do too much," she said, approaching cautiously. He looked up, not surprised. "I do what must be done," he replied quietly. "Even if it kills you?" she asked, the words slipping out before she could stop them. He smiled faintly. "Then it would still be worth it. Protecting others is more important than protecting myself." Lyrana's chest tightened. She didn't understand humans, she realized. They seemed fragile, imperfect, and yet there was a strength inside them that she had never seen in anyone else. She hated that strength because it challenged her pride. She had always believed that the Zilari were perfect, that she could handle any danger on her own. But Elias made her question that belief. "Why do you obey me?" she asked suddenly, her voice soft, almost a whisper. "You could leave. You don't have to stay with someone who doesn't like me," he finished for her. His gaze was steady, unwavering. "I stay because it is my duty. Because it is right. Because you matter." The words struck her harder than any sword. She felt heat rising to her cheeks, though she quickly turned her face away. She hated how a human could make her feel small and exposed with just a few simple words. She tried to regain control. "Duty isn't loyalty," she said, her voice firmer now. "Humans obey because they fear consequences. You obey because what?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood and walked a few steps toward the garden's edge, looking at the glowing horizon. "Because loyalty isn't about fear. It's about choice. I choose to protect those who cannot protect themselves. And I choose to protect you." Lyrana wanted to scream, to push him away, to remind herself that she was superior, untouchable, but she couldn't. Something in her chest twisted painfully, a mixture of frustration, admiration, and fear. She hated that he could see through her pride, that he could make her question herself without even trying. "You are strange," she said finally, almost a whisper. "I am human," he said simply, "and humans are strange." She wanted to hate him, and yet she couldn't. He had risked his life for her without hesitation. He had saved people she barely knew. He had moved through fire, chaos, and death as if he were made for it. Her heart beat faster than she wanted to admit. She hated it. She hated how much she needed him, even when she had sworn to reject him. Elias noticed her silence but did not press further. He merely returned to tending the small fire, each movement careful and deliberate. Lyrana watched him, trying to fight the strange warmth in her chest, the growing respect, the reluctant admiration that made her feel human. For the first time, she realized something unsettling. Pride and hatred could only protect her so far. Beyond that, there was fear. And beyond fear, there was trust. And trust was terrifying. She hated trusting him. She hated feeling dependent on a human she had once considered beneath her. And yet, somewhere deep inside, she knew she could not turn away. She hated him for making her feel alive. The dawn sky over Zealer was calm, a soft blue that belied the danger creeping toward the palace. Princess Lyrana awoke to a strange feeling in her chest, a mixture of unease and anticipation. Elias had been at her side since the early hours, pacing silently outside her chamber. Normally, she would have dismissed his presence, but today, the tension in the air made even her sharp instincts uneasy. Suddenly, alarms rang through the palace. Red lights flashed and automated messages warned of intruders approaching the city gates. Lyrana's heart raced. She had faced threats before, but none had come so close to the palace itself. "Princess," Elias shouted, appearing at her door almost instantly. "We need to move now." "My mother," she began, but he shook his head. "She's safe. The vault is secure." "You must come with me." She hesitated for the briefest moment, then nodded. Her legs felt heavy, but his hand on her arm steadied her. Despite all the time she had hated his touch, she now clung to it as if it were a lifeline. The palace halls were chaos. Smoke filled the air, and the echo of weapons clashing reverberated off the walls. Rebels from a rival house had breached the palace gates, armed with energy cannons and bladed weapons. The soldiers of Zeller fought valiantly, but the invaders were relentless. Elias moved with precision, clearing paths and guiding her through corridors that twisted like a labyrinth. "Stay close," he instructed, his voice calm but firm. "Do not stray!" Lorana's silver robes brushed against scorched floors as they ran. She caught glimpses of the destruction, the shattered walls, the burning tapestries, the servants and guards fleeing for safety. Panic rose in her chest, but Elias's presence kept her grounded. She hated how much she needed him, hated that the thought of losing him filled her with terror. Suddenly, a section of the ceiling collapsed above her. Elias reacted instantly, throwing himself over her body, taking the weight on his back. A sharp pain shot through him, but he gritted his teeth, keeping her safe from falling debris. "Elias!" she screamed, pressing herself against him. "Move!" he grunted, slowly lifting her to her feet. "I've got you," he said simply. There was no fear in his voice, only resolve. They reached a corridor leading to the Queen's vault, but the path was blocked by mercenaries. Elias stepped forward, drawing his weapon, firing with precision. Each shot took down an enemy, but more appeared. Lorana watched in awe and fear, realizing that this human, this creature she had once despised, was capable of courage and skill far beyond any Zalari warrior. "Go," he commanded. "The vault is close." Lorana ran, glancing back only once. She saw him fighting off multiple attackers at once. His armor scorched, his movements relentless. Her chest tightened as fear and admiration collided. She hated herself for feeling fear, for realizing that without him she might not survive. Finally, they reached the vault. The doors closed behind them, and she collapsed against the cool metal. Elias was beside her in an instant, checking her for injuries. "You're safe now," he said, his voice steady despite the blood staining his armor. You could have died," she whispered, panic still gripping her throat. He shook his head. "If I had, it would have been worth it. Your life matters more than mine." Her hands trembled as she touched his arm, instinctively trying to see if he was truly unharmed. The warmth of his presence, the strength in his gaze, the calm determination, all of it made her heart ache in a way she couldn't explain. She hated that she felt this way. She hated the way her chest tightened when she realized how much she depended on him. For the first time, Lorana understood the depth of human courage. It was not born from perfection or pride, but from choice, from love, from the willingness to risk everything for another being. She hated him. And yet, in the same breath, she felt an undeniable, trembling gratitude. Elias turned to her, brushing soot from her robes. "Stay behind me," he said gently. "We are not finished yet." She nodded, her gaze lingering on him. She hated that she needed him more than she had ever wanted to admit. Outside the vault, the palace continued to burn. But inside, Lorana realized something new. Fear and hatred were no longer enough to protect her. Only trust, and perhaps something even deeper, could. And she wasn't sure if she was ready for either. The palace trembled under the assault of the enemy army. Outside, energy cannons fired beams of deadly light that cut through the crystal towers, sending shards of glass and crystal raining onto the streets. Inside, Princess Lorana's heart pounded as she crouched behind a marble column, trying to keep her breathing steady. Elias stood a few steps ahead, his weapon raised. His armor was scorched, dented from debris, and his hand bled where a plasma blade had grazed it. Yet his posture remained unwavering, his gaze sharp and unyielding. Lorana had never seen anyone so fearless, not in the legends of the Zalari, not in the bravest warriors of her own people. "They're too many," she whispered, panic rising. "You can't fight them all." "I can buy time," he said quietly. His eyes, dark and steady, met hers. "Go, get to the vault, no!" she cried. "I won't leave you." Elias shook his head. "Your life is more important than mine. Now move." Her chest ached, torn between obedience and the desperate need to stay near him. But he had been right every time. She hesitated only for a moment, then darted toward the vault, her heart heavy. From her hiding place, she watched him, one human surrounded by dozens of enemies moving like a storm. He fired his weapon with precision, deflected strikes, and when an enemy approached too closely, he used his fists, strong and unyielding. Lorana gasped as he ducked under a plasma blast, rolled and came up swinging again. The Zalari soldiers who had managed to regroup arrived behind him, but even they hesitated, amazed at his ferocity. He seemed unstoppable yet utterly human. Each time he was hit, he staggered, but he never faltered. He fought with purpose, with heart, with an unshakable will to protect the princess. Her chest tightened. She hated the fear gripping her, the helplessness of watching him risk everything. She hated the admiration that prickled in her eyes. She hated that she cared so deeply for someone she had once despised. Elias fought on. His weapon jammed, but he did not panic. He picked up a fallen sword from the ground, swinging it with skill that belied his human fragility. When that sword broke, he did not hesitate. He used his fists, his strength, and whatever he could find. Each motion was a promise he would not let her die. Lyrana pressed herself against the vault wall, trembling. She wanted to scream, to run to him, to stop him, but she couldn't. She had never understood courage like this. It was raw, dangerous, beautiful, and terrifying. Suddenly, an enemy managed to get past his defenses and aimed directly at the vault door. Elias reacted instantly, stepping into the path and taking the strike on his arm. Pain flashed across his face, but he gritted his teeth and struck down the assailant. Blood stained his armor, yet he moved forward, relentless. Tears stung Lyrana's eyes. She had never seen anyone fight like this, not even in the stories told of legendary heroes. The human was not just protecting her, he was defying fate itself. Finally, the remaining enemies realized their attack was failing. With Elias standing as an unyielding wall, they retreated, leaving destruction in their wake. The palace trembled, smoke and fire filling the corridors, but the princess and the vault were safe. Lyrana ran to him as soon as it was clear. "Elias," she cried, her voice breaking. "You could have been killed. Why? Why risk everything for me?" He looked at her, breathing heavily. Blood streaked across his armor and skin, and smiled faintly. "Because I promised I would," he said softly. "I promised to protect you. Nothing else matters." She fell to her knees beside him, hands shaking as she tried to help him stand. Her silver hair fell across his armor as she whispered, I don't understand. Why do you care so much?" He reached up, brushing soot from her face. "Because some things are worth protecting no matter the cost. Because you are worth it." Her chest ached in a way she could not describe. She hated him, she thought, and yet she loved him in the only way she knew. She trusted him completely, more than anyone else in the galaxy. For the first time, Lyrana realized that human courage was different from hers. It was not born from pride, from perfection, or from rules. It was born from heart, from choice, from the willingness to give everything, even life itself, for another. And he had given everything. The palace was silent now, except for the occasional crackle of dying fires and the distant moan of broken walls settling. Princess Lyrana knelt beside Elias, who was lying against the cold floor of the vault, his breathing shallow but steady. Blood stained his armor, and burns covered parts of his arms and face. Despite the pain, his eyes found hers, and a small, faint smile tugged at his lips. "You're safe now," he said softly, though every word cost him. Lyrana shook her head, tears streaming freely. "You could have died. Why? Why did you risk yourself so much?" Her hands hovered over his wounds, trembling, unsure where to touch, unsure what to do. He reached up weakly and brushed a lock of her silver hair from her face. "Because I promised," he whispered. "I promised that I would protect you. I made that promise, and I always keep my word." She felt a strange warmth at his words, a mix of fear, admiration, and something she could not name. Her chest ached as she realized the depth of his courage, not just the physical bravery, but the human heart behind it. A heart that chose to protect, to sacrifice, to love without expectation. "Elias," she began, her voice breaking, I don't know how to repay you." "You don't repay promises," he said with a faint smile, his hand weakly touching hers. "You honor them, and you survive. That is enough." Lyrana pressed her hand to his, feeling the warmth despite the blood and smoke. She hated how much she wanted to hold him, how much she needed him in that moment. He had saved her, not just from the fire and the attackers, but from the fragile illusion that she could survive alone. She felt anger rise within her, not at him, but at herself. She had hated him for being human, for being imperfect, for daring to touch her life with his strength and heart. And now, in the aftermath of chaos, she hated how much she relied on him, how much she feared losing him. "Why do you care so much?" she whispered. Her voice was barely audible over the soft groan of the palace walls. Why me? He coughed, wincing from the pain, but his eyes never left hers. Because some people are worth protecting, he said quietly. Because I choose to care and because you matter. Her chest tightened, tears blurring her vision. She wanted to tell him that she hated him for making her feel this way. Vulnerable, exposed, alive. But the words stuck in her throat. She couldn't hate him, not now, not after everything. Instead, she leaned closer and rested her forehead against his. I don't know what I would have done without you, she admitted. The words were soft, almost a whisper, but they carried more weight than any royal decree. Elias's smile grew faint, but warmth glimmered in his eyes. You would have survived. You're strong, princess. Humans may be brave, but strength comes in many forms. Yours is remarkable. For the first time, Laurana allowed herself to feel something fully. Gratitude, fear, admiration, and something deeper she couldn't yet name. She had always believed that the Zalari were perfect, that she could face danger alone, that pride and rules were enough. Elias had shattered all that. He had shown her another way, that courage is not measured by perfection, that love is not weakness, and that a human heart, fragile, flawed, and simple, could burn brighter than any crystal tower. Minutes passed, silent and heavy. Laurana stayed by his side, holding his hand, brushing the soot from his hair, whispering encouragements he barely heard. She hated that she felt so powerless, yet so drawn to him. He had risked his life entirely for her, had given everything he had, and she could only sit and watch, overwhelmed by the enormity of it. Finally, she spoke again, her voice firmer now. I will never forget this. Your sacrifice, your promise. I will remember it forever. Not just as a protector, but as someone who gave everything for me. Elias's hand squeezed hers weakly. That's all I ever wanted. You to live. You to remember that some promises are kept no matter the cost. Laurana nodded, pressing her forehead to his again, silently vowing that his courage, his heart, and his sacrifice would never be forgotten. She hated how much she depended on him, hated how deeply he had touched her life. But she also knew something vital. The human beside her had shown her the true meaning of strength, and she would carry that lesson with her, always. Years passed after the attack, and the palace slowly healed. Crystal towers were repaired, gardens replanted, and corridors polished until they shone again. But for Princess Laurana, nothing looked the same. The memory of that day, the fire, the enemy, and the human who had risked everything for her, lived in her heart like a quiet, persistent flame. She often walked through the gardens at dusk, when the sky glowed with colors that reminded her of the fire that had once consumed the palace. She remembered Elias, how he had fought, how he had bled, how he had smiled at her even when danger surrounded them. She had hated him then, she had feared him, and she had depended on him more than she wanted to admit. The queen had long since allowed her to honor him publicly. A statue now stood in the palace garden near the tallest tower, carved from shimmering crystal. It depicted a human standing with a broken sword, his face calm, almost smiling, his stance defiant against invisible enemies. Beneath it were 4 simple words: he kept his promise. Laurana often sat before it, brushing her hand over the smooth surface. The statue reminded her of more than just a protector. It reminded her of courage, sacrifice, and the strength hidden in the hearts of those we underestimate. She remembered the way Elias had caught her from falling, the way he had shielded her from fire, the way he had faced 100 enemies without hesitation. She had once believed the humans were weak, flawed, unworthy, but he had shown her something greater than any perfection of her own people: the human heart. Brave, flawed, determined, and capable of love that transcended fear. Sometimes at night she would close her eyes and imagine his hand brushing hers, the warmth of his presence beside her. She hated the longing that surged inside her, but she could not deny it. He had touched her life in ways no one else could, and she had never been the same. Do you remember me? She whispered to the statue one evening, her voice trembling in the wind. Do you know that I finally understand? The garden was silent, but she felt a presence in her heart, as if Elias's promise had remained alive within her, guiding her still. She smiled softly, a mixture of sorrow and gratitude washing over her. The palace had regained its light, but Lorana knew that the real light had come from him. She had once hated his touch, thinking it rough, unwelcome, unworthy. But now she understood. The touch of someone willing to give everything for you carries a power that shines brighter than any crystal, stronger than any blade, deeper than any law. Her people whispered stories of the human who had defended the princess, a legend of bravery unmatched. But Lorana knew the truth. He was not a legend. He was real. He had been real, and his courage had lived on in her heart. Sometimes she would walk the halls of the palace, imagining him beside her, steady and unwavering,